Welcome to the worst nightmare of all. Reality.
Explore the lesser-known stories of our unknown world. Join the pursuit of the paranormal with Ash and Greg.
Hey everyone, I'm Greg.
I'm Ash.
We're Pursuit of the Paranormal, which you'll probably know because you're listening to our podcast. But there are several ways that you could support the show. You can visit our merchandise store, where we've got loads of clothing and other bits and bobs there for you.
And we also have launched our Buy Me a Coffee campaign.
Tell me a little bit more about that, Ash.
Yes, you can support the show with a one-off donation, or you can also join our membership scheme, which gives you different benefits, including shout-outs on the show, discount on the merchandise store, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, all of these different levels of membership. It just helps us carry on doing what we're doing.
So you can visit all these places and more at our linktree.com/Pursuit of the Paranormal.
Welcome back, Dave. It's been almost a year since we first had you on the show. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Yes, lovely to be back. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, doing great. Thank you. It's been a very busy year.
Cool. So when we first had you on last February, you were in the process of setting up a Kickstarter for your UFO Wave tabletop card game, which you then sort of advertised a bit throughout the year. So a year on, almost. How's that gone?
Yeah, it's been a busy one. It's been an interesting year. The year that I finally successfully released a new card game. It was a big adventure, really. It's I know I spoke with you about this before about the game and everything, so I won't go into too much depth. But for anybody who missed that, essentially what I've gone and created is a new family-friendly fun card game themed entirely on the UFO subject. I believe it's the most authentic portrayal of the real UFO subject ever released in a tabletop game. And I've included many aspects from both from all areas of UFO lore are in there. And you may have there may have been other games released in the past. I know for a while there are a number of board and card games already out there that have used sort of the alien subject as subject matter, but I don't believe that any game will have ever gone to the sort of depth that I've gone into with the aspects included in it. But that said, it's a very sort of tongue-in-cheek game. It's got nice cartoon visuals and everything. And throughout the year, the early parts of the year we were just heavily advertising it. I was bombarding Facebook and other social media, Instagram, etc., with lots of adverts and regular photos and little video snippets of me describing aspects of the game. We had all sorts of different things going on, different competitions, just lots of different things to kind of raise awareness of it, because it's a very, very hard market to break into. Because you get these big corporations who release games regularly, and in I come in as a brand new publisher who's never released a game before. I've got to earn the trust of the people that are going to essentially buy the product. Now, as we previously talked, I released it through Kickstarter, the crowdfunding website, which essentially gives people a chance to essentially get the money up front and then make the product. And I didn't know how that was going to go. So just before the Kickstarter kicked off, this was back in August, just before that, we actually had a table at the UK Games Expo, which is the UK's biggest tabletop gaming convention. And it's held in Birmingham at the NEC. And I've attended that convention numerous times before as an avid tabletop gaming fan, and it was really interesting going there and actually having a table at the place. We kept the price down on that, so it was kind of around the outer edges. It wasn't in the kind of main through flow of traffic, but it was still kind of several days of people that I could demo the game to. People were sitting down and play testing it, giving me my views about other competitions running. Now, during that time, it was around the same period as the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter launched around the same point. We got the dates matched up on that, so that we could kind of excitedly say to people, "It's live now. It's on Kickstarter. You can go and back the product," so they could come and try it out, and then they could just go and back it straight away. And it seemed to work. But it wasn't just from that; it was from all the advertising and everything that had gone before it, really. But it did help a little bit from that as well. All those things combined, and halfway through the convention, we reached our funding goal on Kickstarter. This was about sort of coming up to sort of 3 days into the Kickstarter, which was apparently extremely fast to reach the funding goal. I had other people at the convention were coming up to me saying, "Wow, what was your secret? How did you reach the funding goal that fast? And we only hit it on the last day, or we've released games and it's never reached the funding goal." So there wasn't really too much of a secret. It was just I poured a hell of a lot of money and time and effort into getting it out there. It paid off. We got enough backers. We funded. And then since then, it's really been working with the manufacturer across in China, as a company known as Hero Time. They're the manufacturer I decided to go with. And they shipped out the games from China late last month. And at the moment, right now, they're winging their way to all the people that back the game. And I'm also going to get hundreds of copies show up at the front door, which is going to be interesting. I can't wait to see the size of the crates. My partner and I'd be like, "Where on earth are we going to put all this?" And maybe it's a corner of the loft or something. I'll have to wait and see. And then from next year, I hope to commercially sell the game. Probably going to go down the Amazon route with that. They do take a cut, but at the same time, it gets a lot more exposure for the game, and it's a lot more convenient, and they can take care of all the postage and package and everything from that point onwards. So I think, given the pros and cons, I think it's probably something I'm going to go down. So yeah, anybody who missed the Kickstarter will be able to purchase the game from Amazon at some point within first quarter next year, hopefully. I'm just in the process of working out all that, because I never sold on Amazon either, so it's all new for me. It was just this experiment. I decided to make a game themed on UFOs, and yeah, it worked out.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, because I obviously backed with a few copies when it launched.
Yes.
And I was watching throughout that launch weekend, I just kept refreshing the page. Every time I refreshed, the amount raised was higher and higher and higher. I was just like, wow, just so happy that it had that success.
Yeah,
it's just amazing to watch.
It was good. We got a few of these stretch goals unlocked, which were additional cards that we added to it, that I wanted to add to the game above the base game, which was nice. Some of the higher stretch goals we never reached, but you have to kind of plan ahead and push out goals, because we had no idea how popular it was going to be. And I'm just grateful that it got there. For me, it was just one of the most, seriously one of the most standout moments of the year. And it was even better because a little anecdotal story to that, because when it hit its funding goal, we'd actually gone out for dinner in Resorts World near the NEC in Birmingham, just gone out to find a restaurant. And we ended up in this casino. There was a casino there. One of my friends said we can go and eat at the restaurant inside the casino. And when we went to the casino, we found that we had to become members of the casino to get into eat at the restaurant. Yeah. So we were all signing up. We all got these little cards, proper official membership cards. And checking these over dinner, we found there's £15 on them. I was like, is this actual free money? Can we just go right now and use this on the slots or something? It was no intention to go there to gamble. We were there to eat, yeah. But I thought, well, it's money. If it's on the card, might as well give it a try. So there I go on the slot machine, £15 and won £20. So the £20 I won, we went and bought some cakes and stuff and cheesecake and that, to kind of celebrate when we hit the funding goal. So nice. Yeah, it was quite an interesting evening.
Awesome. So what we're actually going to do as well is we're going to give away a copy of your games to one of our listeners. So for those listening, keep listening and you'll find out how you can enter that giveaway. So that brings us on to today's episode. We are sort of along the same lines.
Yes.
Same sort of industry. So we're going to be talking about UFO and alien representation in video game and video game history. Mm-hmm. So first of all, this is one of your talks that you give.
Yes.
Around the videos. What gave you the idea to do a talk like this?
Well, over the years, I've seen numerous talks on various areas of media. I've been to quite a few talks where people talk about how UFOs have been represented in the area of movies over the years. But I'd never seen a talk on the world of video games and how the subject was portrayed in video games. Well, myself, I'm an avid video gamer as well as being into tabletop gaming. I'm also, I think I've always been drawn to gaming. I think I like the interactivity of it, and I like things that tell a story. And in some ways, it's one step beyond a movie, which again I'm a big fan of films. Absolutely love them. Regularly go to the cinema to watch them on the big screen. and I love kind of getting drawn into a storyline. And I think with video games, just that interactivity level is one step further than that, because it's kind of like a story that's been built for you to explore, and you can interact with it and change different things along the way. And obviously, our generation has grown up to see the birth of video games, really, from the very early days of Pac-Man and everything, you know, right up to where we are now. And I feel very grateful to be alive in this generation, to have seen that progression. And I'm very much into it. I've got a virtual reality headset here at the house, and numerous consoles, gaming PC, etc. So I'm quite a big gaming fan. So one of my numerous interests. So when I'm not writing up case reports or looking to UFOs, sometimes I'll be trying out video games. And late last year, I managed to finally get hold of a PlayStation 5. It's like gold dust.
I did see your face on Facebook.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, you saw the post. Yes, yeah. It was quite a moment, but it was a very bad timing, because I just literally bought all the presents for everybody, and also splashed out towards a new car last autumn. And then all of a sudden, there's the fiance on the phone saying, "You've got several minutes to make your mind up. Do you want a PlayStation 5 or not? I'm in the shop right now." Yeah, something a couple of minutes. I was like, "Yeah, go on then. Let's do this." Yeah, we'll suffer the consequences later. So
absolutely.
So yeah, with this interest in video games, and also obviously a massive interest in the UFO field, I wanted to explore how those subjects meet, and how aliens and UFOs have been portrayed over the years in video games. Now, of course, aliens and sci-fi in general, it's just a very, very big theme, and many video games over the years have featured alien races. Yeah, it's one of the most common things. But there's particular games where they've clearly based it on the actual real subject. So there's many different games out there which anybody interested in video games are going to know about. So, for example, the infamous first-person shooter series Halo on the PC and Xbox. Yeah. So in that, you're fighting a hostile alien race known as the Covenant. But the Covenant don't look anything like any of these species that are reported by people. They're essentially sci-fi. And there's many games of that nature. But there's also a number of games out there that have come out over the years where they have obviously referenced real cases and the real UFO subject, either by the craft that they're showing, or sometimes the aliens themselves. And I'm particularly drawn to those particular games, and that's what I'd like to discuss with you both this evening, those games and various aspects of them, and sometimes how they link to actual real cases on record.
Awesome. Yeah, because I know when you talk, you sort of split into a number of segments or different sections of a talk where you look at different aspects of the UFO field. So you sort of got alien, where aliens are the invading, like getting a lot of movies as well, like War of the Worlds and stuff, where quite common theme in movies where aliens are the invading, sort of invading force. You also talk about where you get to play as aliens, and also general contact, and also about Area 51. Yes. So if we sort of go section by section, if you want to do it like that.
Yeah, no problem at all.
So alien invasion game, obviously the first one that comes to mind in the name itself is Space Invaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
The classic one. Yeah. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's so well known, isn't it? It's there's so many people out there who, even if they don't play video games or know much about it, they'll recognize the creatures from Space Invaders, or the craft from Space Invaders. Now, this was the first, to my knowledge, the first game ever to feature UFOs. And it was, I mean, we're going right back here. This is really early days. It came out, Taito, the gaming company, released it right back in 1978. And it was released by a man named Tomohiro Nishikado. I think I've pronounced that correct. I hope so. The guy's a legend in the video gaming world. Now, it's a very interesting game, and it's one of the earliest arcade games. And right from the off, you find that numerous of these really early arcade games actually featured aliens and UFOs in, which is really interesting. So we're going right back to the roots of gaming here, not right back to the very start, but in actual fact, even the very first video game ever created, Space War, was actually it was themed on flying around in space, flying a little craft. There wasn't aliens or anything. It was a kind of shooter where you had to take on one another. And that was before they even had proper graphics. It was just dots on the screen. And the inventor of that, went down in history as the world's first video game creator. But yeah, back to Space Invaders. So it's very, very recognizable. And that's because the sprites from it have been utilized all over the place. Yeah, you see them on car stickers, breakfast cereals, advertising, T-shirts and artwork everywhere. So it's very, very recognizable, even if people don't really realize where they're from. Now, there's some interesting facts about the game, and one of them is that right back at the start, when he was designing it, he didn't actually initially intend it to have UFOs and aliens as the theme. He actually originally wanted either planes or humans as the enemies that were being shot. Yeah, but Taito said it was too controversial to have it shooting people back then in 1978. How times have changed. Yeah, back then that was considered too controversial. And the planes, he couldn't get a fast enough animation speed. It didn't look right with the plane jumping across the screen. So he decided against that and instead decided to go down this alien route with it. And at that point, he came up with the original name for the game, which was Space Monsters, which, sounds pretty awful, really. The Space Invaders, much better sounding name to me anyway. But the original name was, in fact, Space Monsters, and then later on decided to change it. And his initial inspiration for that came from an article, a magazine article on Star Wars that he'd been reading at the time. And that's where he got the idea of theming it on kind of space and aliens and an alien invading force.
I suppose the late 70s, that's when, Star Wars was coming out, wasn't it? So.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was big in the media at the time and everything, and it would have been all over the news. But the aliens themselves, what comes down the screen, what the rows of aliens, many of you will be familiar with that. They're not actually supposed to be craft, they're actually supposed to be the beings themselves that are coming down the screen. There is a craft that goes across the top called Mystery Ship, which essentially looks like a classic domed disc, a large domed disc, and you can fire upon it to get bonus points, and it will sometimes pop in and fly across the top. But the things coming down the screen in rows are actually beings, not the craft. Many people think that they represent different craft, and that's why they had the kind of jagged animation to them, because it was supposed to be imitating kind of tentacles and legs moving. Now, the actual creation of those was based on the 1953 War of the Worlds film, the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds film. There's a point in the film where they actually showed the occupants. If you've seen it, you may remember it had the eye, which was split into kind of blue, red, and green, and it had this kind of quite a sort of bulbous face and arms out the side. And the actual creation of these as sprites was initially sort of themed on that, and then that's where that came from. And Space Invaders was also famous for the world's first proper sort of national championship that people got involved with. And this was done by Atari back in 1980. They decided to have this national championship for Space Invaders across in America because it had done so well in the arcades across there. So many people turned out for that and battled themselves. And it was essentially the first massive LAN party with prizes up for grabs. There was also numerous songs came out themed on the game as well. There was a band called Player One from Australia, and they released a song called Space Invaders, original, of course. And then later on, there were other songs also themed on the game as well. But yeah, its legacy lives on to this day. There's been many sequels to Space Invaders that have come out over the years on lots of different consoles and different computers. And it's still popular today, and you can still get the latest versions of it on mobile phone, etc.
Yeah, you still see people playing the original one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like emulators and stuff.
It's wide. I mean, the early arcade games are a real challenge because back then they had to kind of up the difficulty on them and make them really challenging. One because of how basic they were, and two because they wanted people to keep on pummeling in coins as fast as possible. So they'd make them especially tough and challenging, so people would be like, "Oh, just one more go, one more 10p or whatever." Whatever it was back then. I don't know what coins they put in back then, but yeah, cents or whatever they were putting into the things. But yeah, essentially that was the reason for this difficulty. And over time, games have become a lot more, so to say, forgiving. And you can save your position and this sort of thing. But back then, it was just you play it, and once you ran out of coins, that'd be it, game over.
It's interesting, and just to take a side note off, I am interested in street art, and
Yes.
so is my wife. And there is actually a street artist called Space Invader, and he goes round and he actually does like tiles, the little square tiles are like pixels. He will randomly put these pixelated aliens, very much like the Space Invader ones, on various streets in Paris. It does them in the UK,
Yeah.
they're in London. So that's just an interesting side note.
Excellent.
That
Yeah,
has
there you go.
infiltrated art as well.
Absolutely, yeah. There's another way that because the symbols are so famous now, they've become kind of almost pop culture in their own right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So next time I'm out, if I see any street art, I'll know it's been done by yourself, Greg.
Yeah. I'm anonymous.
So moving on nicely from Space Invaders, let's have a talk about Asteroids, which came out the following year, 1979, and this one was released by Atari. But it took inspiration from numerous games, including Space Invaders and other games. Now with this one, you were essentially firing upon asteroids that would break apart, and it was kind of taken from top down. It'd be inside a flying spaceship that could fly around the screen and had to pop the asteroids. But occasionally, one of two different types of UFO would also warp in, both of which look like dish-shaped craft and had clearly been based on reports or the real subject matter in terms of their shape. And they would essentially phase in and then try to shoot you with lasers until you popped them out of existence, and then carried on playing. The physics model of asteroids was actually themed on a game called Lunar Lander, where it was a kind of sideways on one where you had to land this little ship on the lunar surface. And that particular one didn't contain any aliens with that. It was just all about landing it, which was, if I remember correctly, was extremely challenging. But players got really good at asteroids, and there was an infinite lives bug that happened with some of the arcade cabinets, and in the end they had to pull the initial chipsets because what happened was people would just stay on it. More and more asteroids would fill up the screen. They couldn't take care of them all, and essentially the game would just slowly grind to an absolute halt. It only happens sometimes in rare cases. But another thing that happened was something called lurking. Lurking was a player tactic. They discovered a particular way of hanging around in a particular area of the screen, which was very safe from the asteroids, and popping them from this location. And again, they were just essentially not dying. So players would be down on the arcade and playing it for hours, on a few coppers. And and in the end, the arcade owners got so fed up with this that they actually ordered Atari to actually change it again and remove the chance of them doing this. Essentially, they were just, what's known today as camping in first-person shooters are similar to that. They found a particular method to just stay in the game for very little money indeed. It all became about the scores with asteroids, even more so than Space Invaders, and various players around the world would just massively compete against one another to beat each other's scores. Back in 1982, a guy called Scott Safran, he actually set the world record at that time with an incredible score of over 41 million points. But back then it wasn't official. Later on, there was a company called Twin Galaxies, and what they started to do was essentially log top scores by players, largely focused on the arcade gaming community. And they also branch out. They still take top scores around the world today, just kind of like the Guinness Book of World Records for video games, essentially. And they actually tried, this was years later, this was in like the late 90s, they actually tried contacting Scott Safran, trying to track the guy down, because he'd basically gone under the radar before they were a thing, and they wanted to honor him and give him a trophy for, having this amazing score. And unfortunately, when they finally tracked him down, they found out that he passed away, sadly. So he never got that, but they honored him after death. It was kind of posthumous honoring of his amazing score on that game, which I thought was very nice of them. It was later on beaten by other players, but so again, we're talking about a very early arcade here that featured UFOs. It didn't feature beings, but it featured craft that were recognizable as domed discs. Still looking at the retro world. Let's have a chat about E.T., the infamous game that came out on Atari. I'm not talking about the movie, but I'm talking about the video game that was made from the movie. Now, you may know the backstory on this one, but for those who don't know, essentially, E.T. became a hostile alien by essentially causing the bankruptcy of Atari, or at least being partially responsible for the destruction of the company, the world's biggest video gaming company. Now, how this happened, for those who don't know the backstory to this, back in 1982, of course, Spielberg released his alien masterpiece, E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Still one of my favorite alien films today. I absolutely love the film. I think it's amazing and really, really nicely done. But with this movie, of course, came the popularity, and Atari wanted to jump on this. They were all over this. They were like, we've got to get the video game for this. And this was back in the summer, and they wanted to release a game in time for Christmas. Well, gaming developers back then, they took quite a long period of time sometimes designing things and everything, but Atari essentially pressurized them into making a game of ET extremely fast. They gave them something like a 6-week turnaround to essentially create the game in that short period of time. Wow. And they gave it a good effort. It was a kind of top-down thing where you played as ET and you had to walk around the forest and find these different sort of parts of your craft or communication device or whatever. Very, very basic graphics, but unfortunately, because of this rush in development, the game just wasn't very good. And they released it to early reviewers, and they basically panned it and said it was very confusing and just awfully designed, and had lots of sort of oddities in it, and that was the nicest comments that were made on it. So with this, they basically printed thousands of these cartridges in time for Christmas, and unfortunately the reviews got out, and loads of people basically boycotted it and didn't want to purchase the actual game for their kids anymore because they'd read the bad reviews. And what this, it wasn't like this was solely responsible for the destruction of Atari. There were other things going on at the same time, but it's thought to be a large contribution into the bankruptcy of the company, and initially it's shut down, unfortunately. And that should have been where the story ended. But in 1983, this urban legend popped up out of nowhere. It was it was a newspaper, the Alamogordo Daily News, I think it was called. It was this little village out in the desert, and they essentially claimed that Atari had dumped truckloads of ET cartridges in the desert.
I've heard this. Yeah.
Now this is thought to be an urban legend. It was passed around, and it went down into gaming lore as something. And people would just bring it up in conversations, classic pub conversation type of thing. But a lot of people were like, "This is just completely made up, fabricated story. They'd never have done that," and this sort of thing. But it was true. Many, many years later, not that actually, only a few years back, I think it was. They actually tracked down the location in the desert and performed a large digging operation and managed to get hold of a number of ET cartridges from out of the sand, and actually dug up the artifacts. And it essentially proved that this urban legend was real, and Atari had just dumped all these cartridges out of the desert. I don't know how many, probably a mountain load. It's like Mount Everest. Had a lot to bury.
It's like the mountain from Close Encounters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They had a Close Encounter right on the top of it. Yeah, absolutely. It would have been a perfect place to make contact, surely. But yeah, it's just fascinating to me that this alien game had caused so much destruction, indirectly, not to discredit the developers. I'm sure that designing a video game is way more challenging than designing a card game, I would say. And I know how long that took me, so all credit to people who develop games, but it went down in absolute history, this little story, and I do love the way it actually turned out to be true in the end.
Yeah, and the gaming community is not the hardest community, not the easiest community to win over either.
Absolutely. My first computer was actually a Commodore 64, and I think I was about sort of 13 or something when I got that. And I remember sort of bugging my parents for one, because everybody else was buying them at secondary school, and I was like, I really, really want one. And that was my first computer. That was what got me into the world of video games. And one of the games that came out for that, again, was themed on UFOs, more closely related. It's a game called Saucer Attack, and it's not very well known. It didn't do anything like as popular as Space Invaders or Asteroids or anything like that. And it came out on the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, the Commodore's big brother. Now with this, you were initially, the early levels, you were actually in front of various Washington monuments, including the White House. And you would have to defend it from waves of saucers that came in. And again, they were kind of classic flying saucers, sort of domed discs and flattened discs. And again, it would be violent. They'd be attacking these monuments in America, and you'd have to take care of them before they destroyed them. Towards the end of the game, in the later levels, you'd actually go up in space in a rocket and then take on the mothership and have to destroy that too. But it was. I think it was probably based on the 1953 movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I think that's probably the inspiration for it. It's not known for definite, but it seems very, very much linked with that movie, I would say, because obviously that was the setting for that film. But there was, of course, also the real life incident that happened a year before in 1952. Where UFOs were seen over Washington, in the skies over Washington, and even flying over the top of the White House. Some of you may have seen the infamous photograph. I say in inverted commas because it's not actually real. It wasn't a real photograph. It was a mock-up that was used on a documentary linked with that incident, but it got bandied around all over the internet and all over magazines and this sort of thing. And there's many sites and everything will say this is a genuine photo from that incident, and it seems to show kind of triangular shaped patterns of lights flying above the White House. That's actually a mocked up image, not the real deal, but it's been bandied around like that. But this real incident happened a year before the Earth versus the Flying Saucers come out, and it's not known whether the developers of Saucer Attack maybe they were interested in it and heard about that case and decided to base it on that.
That's one that's on a part of Project Blue Book, wasn't it, as well?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it was featured in. I mean, Project Blue Book looked into it, and the TV series obviously they also honoured that case as well. And I really actually rated that. Moving away from video games a minute, I thought the Project Blue Book was an excellent TV series.
Yes, they cancelled it.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I thought it was very high quality and very well done. I mean, they obviously over elaborated some of the cases a bit, but what TV series doesn't? Yeah, I thought it was very well done. So let's move forward a bit in time now. We're going to move forward to the sort of mid-90s with an infamous game, XCOM UFO Defense, as it was called in the USA. In the UK, it was UFO Enemy and Unknown. I've got no idea why they had those two separate titles for it, but this one was massively based on the UFO subject. It had lots of different aspects to it that were linked with the real subject, and they quite clearly done their homework. Now, in this, you were essentially a military operative as part of this top secret clandestine government group who were essentially in charge of controlling alien interception on planet Earth. And it was a tactical game where you'd manage the base and everything and build up kind of buildings of your base and research new technologies. But also, you would bring down craft. And then you would go out to investigate those craft, and it would switch to an isometric top-down view where you'd kind of walk around in 3D and have to take care of the invading force of aliens. And you could actually study their corpses. So you could take the corpses back to the base and essentially autopsy them and learn more about how they were. How they were made up and everything, and you can already see even with these things that I'm saying, the links with the real subject there, and obviously there's all sorts of rumors about about the MOD and CIA etc. doing this for real in the background, out of the public eyes. Now, the main species in this game were known as the sectoids, and they were quite clearly themed on the Greys. They were essentially the Greys. Looked exactly the same, but they called them the sectoids in the game for whatever reason. But it was very, very interesting, very, very compelling game. They released lots of sequels for it. With the sequel, Terror from the Deep, they took it down underwater. Yeah, and it had underwater alien bases.
I love that game. So I never played the original one, but I played
you played the sequel
from Beyond the Deep, was it, or Enemy of the Deep?
Yeah, Terror from the Deep. Yeah,
Terror from the Deep is an incredible game.
Yeah, and the aliens in that essentially looked like underwater versions of Greys. They were called the aquatoids, And they were in the game. The backstory for them was that they were a sterile race who were using human hybridization to essentially procreate their race, which obviously is one of the main kind of themes of contacts with the hybrid program, and that's what people. Yeah, that's one of the views as to what's happening with that and why they're doing that. So it's interesting to see. Again, they quite clearly looked into the contact subject and used elements of that in the background for things. There was also mention of the Roswell crash and other things. They did also want to include the Men in Black in the game, but they actually held it back with the plans to develop a completely separate game themed on the Men in Black that never materialized. It never happened. And the game starts as an old game called Laser Squad. And it was Laser Squad it wasn't a kind of prequel to the game, but it had the same theme with the base building and the isometric view, and that was clearly where it was kind of like a sequel to that, but they changed the theme of it. The inspiration came from the TV show in the 60s, UFO, and also from Bob Lazar's claims from Area 51. The developer Julian Scoop had actually looked into Bob's claims about back-engineered craft on the base, and that was his inspiration for the game. I actually got to speak with him a while back while I was developing my talk. I reached out to him and asked him some questions about the development of it. So yeah, it was very, very nice.
Cool.
So yeah, that's some examples there of where the aliens have been kind of somewhat hostile, but you can see there, even though they've been used in a hostile manner, the craft and the being types and everything match real cases, and some of the aspects of the games fit in with that. Of course, it's a lot harder to make a game where the aliens would be kind of neutral or friendly, because most video games require you to do something, and a lot of the time you're shooting things, and obviously you need something to shoot, some targets. So I think that's the main reason for. I don't think there's any kind of deep conspiracy behind that. And I would say the same for the movies. I would say that it just makes Alien Invasion, makes a kind of fascinating and action-packed story. I don't think, and I'm not saying that in all cases that there might not have been something nefarious going on with that and some kind of need to make them seem overly hostile. Of course, many people believe that they're doing that right now, and this whole kind of warnings of of danger and this sort of thing, and kind of portraying them in a negative light, and that's not something to be taken lightly, of course, because of course many people who've been taken, do see them in a very negative light because of the lack of consent. And I've obviously spoken with many of those people over the years from all different countries, and it really it deeply affects people's lives, and it has some very, very negative angles, which you don't really see covered by the media and everything, because a lot of the time they'll kind of look at it in a kind of very jokey way, but the reality of it is far different. And I know that many people would view them as hostile because of what's going on with that. I think it's a very deep, very complex subject, and I think that just the same that as humans have different groups, we can be both really nice and absolutely dreadful to one another. I think that why would the same not apply to other species as well? So I think it's a lot more complex than they're just either just good or just evil. Yeah, that sort of thing. But definitely. So let's move on to some examples next, where you actually play as the aliens themselves. And some of these have still got that kind of hostile intent to them, but rather than kind of shooting the aliens, you actually are the aliens, which I suppose links back to my card game a bit, because in UFO Wave, you actually play as the alien species rather than the military or whatever trying to stop them. And I'm going to start with an absolutely classic game, very, very good fun. It came out on PS2 and Xbox in 2005. It's known as Destroy All Humans. And it spawned a couple of sequels, and they recently re-released the first one for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It's kind of a parody of 1950s B movies, so the classic sci-fi B movies of the past. But again, classic alien invasion stuff. But through that, they've linked in lots of aspects of the real UFO subject. So you essentially play as a character known as Cryptosporidium 137, or Crypto for short. And he's essentially a grey. He's not called a Grey. They're called the Furon in the game. So again, they changed the name of the species. They haven't just called them the Greys, but he's obviously themed on the Greys, and has many aspects to him that would fit with that. He speaks telepathically. He has very strong mind capabilities and can control humans and also livestock, and kind of move objects around with his mind and this sort of thing. And the backstory of this is he'd come to Earth to find out what had happened to his predecessor, who had come to the planet back in 1947, which of course is reference to the Roswell crash. So he basically comes to see what had happened and taken on from that. Now, in the game, you actually harvest brain stems from the humans, which sounds really, really horrible. It's all done in a very cartoony, kind of fun way. Yeah. But essentially, when you shoot the humans with your ray guns or whatever, you take these brain stems and collecting those. And this is the backstory to that. Is that they'd visited us a long time in the past. So again, they've linked in the ancient aliens theories about them visiting us thousands of years ago, and essentially their DNA had become imprinted with humans' DNA back thousands of years ago. So that's why you're kind of retrieving that DNA from the humans to essentially power your own race, who are kind of in decline again. So you can see the very, very similar views to UFO Enemy Unknown there. You also have to defeat the clandestine government group Majestic, obviously Majestic 12. They actually feature in the game. I don't know what the government thinks of the fact that they're including them in the game, but as to my knowledge, they didn't contact the developers or try to warn them away from anything. But we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I'm not saying that has never happened, because there's a number of cases on record where it appears to have happened with TV series and movies themed on the subject. There was if you've ever seen the TV series Dark Skies, do you remember Dark Skies? So it was a bit like the X-Files, and it was very closely linked with the UFO subject. And the creators of Dark Skies, they claimed that they'd had warnings over the phone from an unknown agency, and they actually, in the end, they wanted to meet with them, and they chickened out essentially because they were worried for their lives or what was going to happen to them if they went and met up with them. And we don't know whether that story's real or not, but there's no reason really for them to make that up. It's not like, they didn't do it at the time the series was released, like some sort of thing like, oh yeah, we got warned by the government, you're not allowed to watch this or anything like that. It was just this anecdotal story that came out many years later, and the way that they told it felt very, very believable. Now, of course, that might not have been a government agency on the other end of the phone. It could have been just somebody playing a prank on them who'd watched the TV series, so who knows? But yeah, there's other claims that it's happened with movies as well. So why not video games? There may have been occasions where they may have either been guided to include certain aspects or remove certain aspects from the games. But either way, in this, the Majestic group was in there, and yeah, it was quite a fun tongue-in-cheek game. It was quite violent, but it was all done in a kind of in a fun comedic way. Very good sense of humor running throughout it. Occasionally, you could get up in your craft, which is a classic dome disc, and you could take off and then sort of destroy buildings from the air. You could abduct people in it. You could abduct cattle in it, which links into the animal mutilation thing. You didn't really mutilate the cattle because that's obviously a very, very dark aspect of the UFO subject, but you could sort of collect them into the craft essentially. So I didn't go into too much depth on that. I mean, it's a little bit too dark for a video game, of course, but some of the craft weapons included the abducto beam, which you could pick people up with, and something called the jumbo probe, which is obviously themed on probes in the contact subjects that have been used on people. So it was some interesting elements to that game, all done in a tongue-in-cheek way, but they'd obviously done their homework into the subject. Another one I wanted to talk about came out on the PC much later. Now, this one came out in 2013, and it seemingly had nothing to do with UFOs. It's a game called World of Warplanes, and essentially it's a massive multiplayer online flight sim, military flight sim, where players sort of battle it out in World War planes. I believe it's still going today, and I think it's free. So if anybody wants to try it out, you're more than welcome to online. But soon after the game came out on the start of April in 2014, so the game had only been out a few months, for their April Fool's gag, they added a new vehicle, a new flight vehicle to it. It was something called the Kampfplatter Sleipnir 1. And essentially what it was a dome disc that was exactly themed on the supposed discs that had been built by the Nazis back in the war. There's all sorts of claims that the Nazis were back engineering craft and essentially trying to build flying discs. Then it's widely known that the Nazis were looking into all sorts of aspects, into their cult and that sort of thing, and any way that they could potentially gain an advantage in the war. So I would say that the idea that they'd be looking into the UFO subject to try to do that seems quite believable. There's a craft that they apparently created called the Hanabu 1 craft. Now, there's numerous photos that you can find of this online, which this craft inside World of Warplanes was clearly based on. Now, it's largely believed that those photographs are frauds. Many people don't believe that they're accurate. There are people out there who do, and again, it's like many aspects of the subject. You have to do your homework, look into it, and come to your own opinions on whether that was a real thing or not. But it's certainly been proved that they were attempting to build disc-shaped craft and were apparently unsuccessful with it, and they couldn't get them to fly correctly. But who knows, behind the scenes what really went on. One of the other claims is, of course, the thing known as the Nazi bell, which again, there's all sorts of entire websites devoted to online. But I would say with these old stories from the past, you always have to be very, very careful, because it's very easy these days for people to kind of make up things, and they can make it look extremely convincing. With sort of lots of what appears to be official military documents backing up such things. Take, for example, the Hanbury craft. It had proper sort of full schematics of how the thing was built and everything. And to intents and purposes, you look at those and they do look like real schematical drawings, but we don't really know whether they were legit or whether somebody randomly created them and put them out there. We do know that there's many, many hoaxes online these days. You have to be very, very careful. But yeah, it was. I never actually tried the game and everything. I just came across this online. I don't know if the UFO is still in there or not. I do realise later on they actually added another second UFO craft as well, which I think was based on Bob Lazar's claimed domed disc at Area 51. So I think that's in there as well. But whether they're still in there today or not, I don't know, because I don't play World of Warplanes myself. So maybe you want to check it out, guys, and let me know if they're in there.
I'll have a look. Got a note of that.
But yeah, of course, you've got the other side of things as well with gaming. Gaming in recent years has become quite big in the mobile world. So as well as just computers and consoles, people can now play video games on the move on their mobile phones. And when I was in the office, I used to kind of at lunchtime, I'd just sit there and play a few games on my phone sometimes to kind of break up the day nicely. But back in 2014, a game called Grabatron came out on iOS and Android, and you can still download that off the store today. And again, it had a bit of a destroy all humans kind of tongue-in-cheek aspect to it. And in this, you controlled this. Again, it was a classic domed disc. And it had this kind of robotic claw that would come out of the bottom of it, and you could pick up objects with it and kind of swing them around, essentially, and smash them up. So you'd have to pick up tanks and people and fling them around the screen with kind of quite destructive physics to it. But again, there's another example there where they'd used a known craft type in the real subject and included it in their game. And there's many other games out there. It's just one example there. There's many games featuring sort of UFOs of various types. Yeah, big world out there. There's lots. I mean, here I'm only mentioning, very briefly, just a few of the examples on, there's many others. But I've decided to focus on these because I feel that they've certainly looked into the real subject a lot with what they've included. So yeah, that's a bit of a background there on some of the kind of more hostile alien races, and now we've looked at where you're playing as the aliens themselves, still in a kind of hostile way, but a lot of the time that's due to the necessity of the game. But yeah, let's move on to Contact and how the abduction subject has featured in games. Because again, this shows up from time to time, and we're going to rewind the clock now, and we're going to go right back to the early arcades, like we were talking about earlier on. And one of the earliest arcades that was very well known, and again extremely challenging, was a game known as Defender. It came out in 1981, and in this you control a spacecraft. It was horizontal, and you'd be flying across this other planet. It wasn't supposed to be the Earth or the Moon or anything, but you were flying across this planetary surface, and it was extremely fast paced. So you could zip around like left and right, and really quick, shoot lasers out the front. But what would happen is these little craft essentially would come down the screen, and there'd be a number of astronauts walking around on the planet's surface, and they would come down and they would essentially pick them up and lift them off the ground and try to take them away with them. So it was the first time that the abduction subject had ever been featured in a game. And this is one of the first games to ever, to make it big in the arcades. So we're going right back here. The craft, kind of like the creatures from Space Invaders, has sort of various looks to them. One of the craft types was known as the Beta. The craft names were based on their interactions with the player and the sort of things that they would do. But the Beta essentially looks like a classic cigar-shaped UFO with a line of lights along its kind of central rim. So it was interesting to see that in there. But I thought it was fascinating the way that they'd included the abduction subject in one of the first arcade games ever. I mean, they weren't really picking them up in beams, but they were essentially trying to take humans away. Now, if you didn't shoot the alien craft before it took them off the top of the screen, they would essentially mutate the astronaut, and they'd come back as this kind of hostile monster that would then fly after you and try to shoot you. There was a novel made much later on called Hyperswarm. It came out by Tim Wagner. And he based that on the Defender game. I've not read it personally, but it's just an anecdotal thing about that. If anybody has read it, that's to let me know what it was like. But yeah, in my era of PC gaming, we moved forward to sort of 2006 now. I can't even remember what I was doing back in 2006. Maybe I was at university or something like that. Yeah, maybe just left it. Anyway, either way, it was a game came out on PC and Xbox 360 called Prey. It was a first-person shooter. Now, in Prey, you played the part of a Cherokee Indian who was also a mechanic, a guy called Damasi Tawadi, I think his name was. Now, at the start of that game, essentially a mass abduction happened, and it was very, very dramatic for the time. It was really. The visuals were really good, and you essentially started in this kind of outskirts of this desert town in the bar, just talking with some of the locals, and all of a sudden this massive mothership known as the Sphere appeared in the sky, rips the roof off the building and starts to abduct people all around you up into it. You then get taken up into the craft. Now it's quite hostile. They are essentially harvesting the humans and breaking them down and this sort of thing. But you undergo this abduction experience. You manage to free from your bonds aboard the mothership, and then essentially run around it trying to rescue other humans aboard and stop the aliens. Now, the aliens themselves weren't based on greys or any other known species, but it had definitely featured the abduction phenomena at the start. Another thing that they also featured in the game was astral projection, which is very interesting. In the game, you could learn to do something known as spirit walk, which was essentially come out of your physical body. This linked back to a Cherokee Indian tradition, and it's also known that the Cherokee Indians, in their ancient myths of their culture, they reference what seems to be visitations by alien beings. So some of their myths refer to that specifically. There was one particular myth where they said that the tribe heard this deep rumbling coming from over the horizon, and essentially this massive object appeared in the sky, and it took this kind of central village house and the whole top of a mountain up into it, essentially moved it to a different location and put it down. So there's numerous tales in Cherokee Indian tradition which fit with the alien subject, with ancient aliens. So it's very interesting, and they seem to have referenced this in the game by linking that in. And it was very nice to see the astral projection also covered in the game as a kind of side point, something you could do in it. But another game where you ran around a mothership was it was an expansion to the post-apocalyptic first-person shooter Fallout. Fallout started as a top-down role-playing game, but in later ones there, from Fallout 3, they took it first person essentially, and it was essentially after a nuclear apocalypse, and you'd be wandering around the wastelands and meeting with some of the survivors and sort of mutated people and this sort of thing. Very, very deep, very compelling game with all sorts of locations to explore, massive open world, lots of things to craft and find, really, really beautifully constructed games. Fallout 3, it's had numerous expansions. The main game was very, very popular, and they were able to later on release numerous expansions. And the 5th expansion that came out was called Mothership Zeta. Now, the name Zeta is a reference to the Zeta Reticuli, which is the star system, which in the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case in 1971, Betty, under hypnosis, described a star map that she'd seen aboard the craft, and she drew the stars. When she came out of hypnosis, she drew the positions of this supposed star map on a piece of paper for the hypnotherapist. And at the time, it didn't seem to match up with any known star system. But a number of years later, they found a star system which, at the time, they named it Zeta Reticuli, and at the time they thought it was an exact match. It turns out more recently they've done some more analysis into that, and it is slightly off. But I mean, how accurate would her drawing be? I mean, she's just hand drawn it on a piece of paper, and also people argued the point that from a different point in space, like if you went on Earth, the stars would look different, they'd be in different positions. But I have to say to that, well, maybe they were showing her it as it would have looked to her from the Earth on purpose. So I think that's a mute argument, that particular thing, and it's a very interesting aspect of that contact case. And they clearly included it in the name of their game, Mothership Zeta. So essentially at the start of the game, you find a radio transmission that you pick up, and you follow this radio transmission, and it leads to a crashed saucer. And at that point, while you're checking it out, you essentially get abducted and taken aboard the mothership. And the game starts with a classic alien abduction type scenario. So you're lying down on a kind of flattened bench with lights over you and numerous grey light beings standing around you. Once you manage to escape from that, you then get to explore the ship itself. At one point, you come across a hangar bay, which has numerous domed disc-shaped craft kind of hanging in it. And eventually you make it to the bridge of the craft and manage to kind of direct it back to Earth and escape it. But the beings in that were quite clearly themed on greys. Again, they were kind of quite hostile to you, probably because you were running around their mothership without permission. But either way, that's what happened in that particular expansion. And UFOs are featured as a, shall we say, Easter eggs. By Easter eggs, I mean kind of little secret things that have pocketed away for you to find for avid players who explore the map fully to track down. And UFOs have often been used as Easter eggs in games. So there's some games which aren't particularly themed on the subject, but they may have UFOs in as an Easter egg, like find the crashed saucer. I recently played a shark-themed game called Maneater on the PlayStation 4, and underwater you come across a crashed saucer on the floor of the ocean in that. So that's just one example there. And Fallout, all the way through it, every Fallout game has different Easter eggs to find. A lot of the time, kind of crashes of saucers. In the 4th one, you actually witness the crash come down, and it goes down overhead with smoke, and you follow it and find a crashed saucer and the living occupant in the back of this cave hiding away. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's great that they're including the subject and aspects of it in their game, even if the main game isn't themed on it. But obviously with that expansion pack, they decided to solely focus on the alien subject there. Another game which is very famously got Easter eggs is the Grand Theft Auto series, very, very famous game series, obviously very controversial, not exactly suitable for kids, this one. But essentially in Grand Theft Auto, I don't think it's been in every single game, but I think from the third one onwards, it had numerous links to the UFO subject. It would be little Easter eggs pocketed away, and we're going to get back to one of the, shall we say, bigger Easter eggs in San Andreas later on in the talk. But in Grand Theft Auto 5, there was a couple of missions that were themed on the contact subject. Now, in the game, there's a particular mission that you do called Grassroots, and it starts with you essentially taking drugs, and in this hallucinogenic state, you get attacked by these alien beings that essentially look like reptilians. So rather than being greys, they'd use the kind of reptoid type form, so essentially sort of lizard men type people, and you'd have to kind of fight them off essentially. There was also a second mission later on where you were essentially abducted and had a whole sequence with you going aboard the craft and being surrounded by these beings. So it wasn't just kind of drug induced. There were some of the games you'd find them. There was one particular game, I think it was again the fifth one. In the fifth one, you found one in the ice towards the start of the game. If you look very carefully, it's in a kind of frosty type environment. And if you look on this particular path, you can look under the ice, and there's one of these reptilian beings kind of frozen under there. And there's another bit where you go down to a film studio, and they're kind of filming some sort of alien film, and there's people wandering around dressed up as the beings. But I mean, Grand Theft Auto 5 came out a good while ago now, at least sort of 10 years ago. Everybody's waiting for the next one, and at some point it might come out. But they are still featuring Contact in games, even new ones. And a few months ago, a demo came out for a game called They Are Here. I think this one's just coming out on PC, probably. If any of you have got Steam, you can download a demo of They Are Here off Steam. And essentially, it's a first-person horror game, kind of horror mystery game. And it's very, very much themed on the abduction subject. And the backstory for it is that you're a journalist who's essentially witnessed an abduction take place at this farmhouse. And you return to the location to kind of search for clues, etc. Now, in the demo, you see craft in the sky. Essentially, they're glowing orbs. You don't really see them too up close. There are greys wandering around. It's quite similar in a way to the film Signs. It's quite a lot like that. So kind of tall fields of corn with greys peeping out and this sort of thing. When you go inside the house, there's also drawings on the walls and some actual photographs from real UFO cases that they've utilized inside the game. So There's obviously a lot of references to the real subject.
That sounds amazing.
It made me jump a couple of times. It's quite creepy. It's quite well done. It's a short demo, but the graphics are very, very good, and it's free to go and download. I believe it's going to be coming out later this year, so I'm really looking forward to the main thing. Now, if they're taking it down a horror route, but they often do with this subject, so which some people may not agree with. Of course. I mean, to my extent, the beings seem to be quite neutral, I would say. From looking into lots of cases, I believe that a lot of the time the negativity from the experiences comes from the fear of the unknown, because they don't know what's happening to them. The beings very rarely kind of say anything to them. A lot of the time they're paralyzed. So there's all sorts of kind of fear elements to the contact subject. And of course, the lack of consent is a problem for many people. But obviously, they take it down a kind of a dark route sometimes, like the film The Fourth Kind, which and some people thought that was based on a real case. It wasn't actually a real case. But people actually contacted me asking for my opinions on that, and I was like, it didn't actually take place. But it was done very, very convincingly, to the point that people did think it was an actual case, and they even built a kind of background website for it that you could go and check out that appeared to be legitimate. So it was kind of similar to what they did with the Blair Witch Project, where they kind of come up with the full background for it and everything. But that said, it was very, very much linked on the contact subject. But they took it down as kind of quite a dark route, a sort of horror route, which didn't agree with everybody. I was okay with it. but I'm very interested to see the different ways that the subject is portrayed, because obviously it's not always that way. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I don't think anybody could say that was a horror, although very sad in places. I still remember crying towards him. So bring back the memories. So yeah, that's they are here, and yeah, do check that out. So I was quite impressed by the demo of that. So yeah, let's move on to Area 51 and how that's been portrayed in video games over the years. So again, we'll go through things in kind of age order. There's a few examples here that I've particularly chosen. There may be others out there as well. Of course, Area 51 is very big in UFO lore as the top secret American base where they are potentially, or some people would say definitely, have recovered alien tech and are kind of potentially back engineering it. Many of you have heard the claims of Bob Lazar. Now, I certainly buy his claims. I think that he seems very, very compelling in the way he has come across over the years. But who's to say for definite? I think it would make perfect sense for there to be for that top secret base out in the desert to house things like that. And they're certainly working on top secret black projects across there all the time. So for all we know, some of that tech could have come from downed or recovered craft. Absolutely. May not be there today. They may have moved it off elsewhere. It would make sense for them to have moved it off base to somewhere else that wasn't in the public limelight so much. Now, of course, they featured Area 51 heavily in the movie Independence Day, and they got they got agreement to do that from the government. But by that time, it was known about. I mean, there were many years where they pretended the base didn't even exist, and you couldn't find it on maps and this sort of thing. And that's how clandestine it was. Yeah, so it does make you wonder, doesn't it? But yeah, with that popularity of Area 51 in the UFO lore, they have included it in various video games. And to my knowledge, the first one was a game called, it was just called Area 51, the arcade game. And it was a shooter game where you pick up plastic pistols and aim them at the screen. It came out from Atari back in 1995. And in this, you played as a part of this crack team that had gone into the base. There'd been a kind of mutation, a virus that essentially the aliens had kind of escaped on the base. And it was an alien race known as the Kron. And they weren't particularly themed on Greys or any other known types, but they'd essentially mutated humans into these kind of zombie-like forms as well. So some of the staff of the base had essentially gone hostile, and you're sent in and you're part of this group known as STAR, the Strategic Tactical Advanced Alien Response Team. So you go in with there, and depending on how many quarters you chuck into the thing, depends on how far you get through the base. So I think that was probably the first time Area 51 was mentioned. There was a sequel come out a number of years later called Area 51 Site 4. Now, with the sequel, that was the name was in reference to S4, which is the supposed area off to the side of the main base that Bob Lazar claimed housed some of the alien tech that they were working on. And there's numerous other claims, including those of you who know the story about the tall whites, the beings were supposedly being housed there at S4 as well. But yeah, they reference that in the name Site 4. Back to Grand Theft Auto next. We've got Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which was essentially Grand Theft Auto 4. It was themed on an area known as San Andreas, a mythical area, which was heavily themed on the areas of California and Nevada. And of course, Nevada is the location of Area 51. And they'd actually included the base in the game. They'd called it Area 69 in the game instead of Area 51. And you could actually head out there to the desert. And what it was is it was a bunch of empty buildings, really. I was really hoping that they'd gone to, you could go down underground and find this top secret labs and this sort of thing. But it was essentially just a lot of open hangars that kind of loosely resembled how Area 51 looks from the air. But there was a tannoy system that was still active, and the PA on the tannoy would make these statements saying, "Can you please come and clear up the autopsied bodies," and this sort of thing. So they make various references to alien stuff going on there at the base. Now, just down the road from there, you could also find the Lil Probe Inn, it was called, which was the Little Alien, the infamous kind of bar in Rachel, the nearest small town to Area 51, and it was quite well done. I've actually visited Little Alien and the base, been to both the gates. It was an adventure, shall we say. But the Little Alien, it was quite well done. So just down the road from this, you could go in and there was lots of UFO photos on the walls and this sort of thing. So you couldn't really call it an Easter egg because it was a whole area of the game essentially. It wasn't particularly hard to find. But in later Grand Theft Auto games, like I've already mentioned, there has been very, very well hidden craft that you could find. There's one in Grand Theft Auto 5 where there's this really, really tall peak in the game, and if you climb right to the top of the peak and you go there at a particular time of evening, a massive domed disc-shaped craft will appear in the sky above you. And there's other links, some of which are linked to sort of real world locations. So yeah, it was interesting to see that in there. The last Area 51 game I'd like to go over it was just called Area 51, and it came out on the PC, the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox back in 2005. And I remember excitedly playing this on the PC when it came out. I was like, wow, this is really good, because they'd referenced all sorts of stuff. Again, they had the greys in there and everything, and you could properly explore the base. And again, it was similar to Area 51 Arcade. There'd essentially been this virus outbreak, but the backstory was that the greys in this weren't necessarily hostile, but the virus had essentially taken them over, causing them to act in a hostile manner. And it had also taken over the staff of the base again and sort of mutated them in various ways. That in that game you played as a kind of hazmat operative named Ethan Cole, and the voicing of Ethan was David Duchovny, who of course played Fox Mulder in X-Files. So it was absolutely great. And I recognised the voice straight away when I got the game, and I didn't realise at all, and I hadn't read too much about it. I'd just seen the kind of previews and this sort of thing, and it was really good to discover that. Later in the game, you actually meet a friendly grey who and he's named Edgar, which I think that they named it Edgar essentially. But Edgar was voiced by Marilyn Manson, the infamous heavy metal singer. So again, you had a kind of cameo of him doing the voice of Edgar throughout the game, which was brilliant. And you could explore the base again. You could find kind of captured alien craft and groups of extraterrestrials who would attack you with sort of telepathic type abilities. Later on, the sequel came out called Black Site Area 51, but it was kind of very loosely linked with the first game, but not really. It wasn't really a follow on. It was like a standalone thing, and to my disappointment, they'd largely moved away from the real UFO subject for it. So you went back to the base, but essentially you were fighting all sorts of strange life forms like giant tentacle monsters and this sort of thing. Right near the end, you do see a holographic projection of a grey's head, and that was about the only link to the subject really throughout the whole thing, which was interesting because it seemed to be a direct sequel at first to the first one. But there we go. That's what they do with things sometimes. So that's some examples there where they've utilized the infamous Area 51 base in the world of video gaming, and that really kind of wraps things up for my examples. As I said, I've got the virtual reality headset. There are some games that have come out on the VR that have featured UFOs, and you get to see them. Actually, when I first got the headset, the initial one, it was called the developer kit. So it was essentially the headset that came out before they officially released it in shops. Now, I went around to my friend's house and tried this out, and I was sold immediately on it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I want to be part of this. So I bought a developer kit to link to the PC. And in that, one of the early things they developed was a kind of virtual alien abduction type experience. So it wasn't really a game, but essentially you saw these glowing orbs, and then would be taken aboard and find yourself in a kind of room lying down, and you get to experience that firsthand in VR and look around you and this sort of thing. It was quite a short experience. Later on, they with the release of the proper one, which is called the CV1. I know now you've got later models, the Quest and the Quest 2, but the CV1 was the first official one, and the one that I still own now. There was a game came out on that called Don't Let Go. And in Don't Let Go, essentially, it was kind of a scare tactics game. You had to put your fingers down on the keyboard, and that would start the game. And then essentially, the game would try to scare you in virtual reality to make you let go of the keyboard, like jump or whatever. And if you jumped and let go of the keyboard, the game would end. Well, a particular point in Don't Let Go, most of the things were kind of things like spiders crawling up, virtually crawling up your arm, and dinosaurs walking in. But there's one particular point in it where a massive UFO comes in. And it wasn't particularly jumpy. I reached out to the developer of the game, and I actually interviewed him. And one of my main questions to him was, why did you put that bit in there? And why wasn't there a kind of jump scare with it? And he essentially said he wanted to give people a bit of a breather off all the frightening stuff and put in something that was just more awe-inspiring. And it is pretty awe-inspiring to see it in the full VR, where you can kind of look around wherever you like. And this massive dome disc basically just comes in, hovers above you with blue lights in the underside, and then just drifts slowly away into the distance. And it's quite an experience seeing that in virtual reality. It's really interesting to see what they do with that in the years ahead. I do hope for some more type experiences, because I delved into other areas of the paranormal with that. I've got something called Flatline, which again is it's an experience. It's a near-death experience that was reported by somebody who almost died in a hospital bed. They reported their experience in great depth, and they've actually turned it into a virtual reality experience with them actually voicing over the top in audio, describing the experience, and you're seeing it in first person as it happens, which is pretty cool. So I like the way that they're looking into areas of the paranormal, and they're sort of saying, well, many of us may not get a chance to ever see this firsthand, but in the world of virtual reality, they can do that. So you can have a UFO experience and see what that would be like, or have a near-death experience. Heaven forbid we don't really want a near-death experience, of course. Nobody wishes to have that, but that's just an example there of different ways that they're using virtual reality, linking with the paranormal and UFO subjects. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed my examples there and the kind of look into UFOs and aliens in video games.
Yeah, I'm glad you got on to Grand Theft Auto 5, because that's one of the freakier moments where you take the drugs and start on this hallucinogenic
absolutely, and
invasion.
It's kind of it's I don't obviously I didn't fully agree with the fact that you were seeing them while you're on drugs, and I don't wish to offend anybody listening to this. The subject is in any way linked with drugs. I'm not saying that people can't experience strange things while they're on drugs, and I've spoken with people in the past who may have had experiences, but when I found out that they've been on drugs at the time, obviously you have to take that into account. With the situation. But obviously that themed heavily throughout various areas of the game and everything, so they linked it in via that way. But in most of the experiences in the Grand Theft Auto series, you're not on drugs. Take for example the one on the top of the mountain that I said with the massive craft appearing and everything. So they keep on putting little snippets of the subject in there. And it'd be interesting to see if the developers one day do a full game themed on the UFO subject.
I believe Red Dead Redemption 2 has also got a scene where there's some strange lights and such like that come
I've heard that. I did actually start playing Red Dead Redemption 2. This is the cowboy game. Absolutely superb quality. I got about halfway through it, and then my PlayStation decided it wanted to crash and reset, and I lost my save game. And I was, no.
That's it.
I should have put the save game on the cloud, and that was it. And I never went back to it after that, because I put so many hours into it. That's the only time.
I bought the Xbox One X, and that was specifically so I could get Red Dead Redemption 2. I've not even played it at all. My daughter's completed it, but I've not even played Red Dead Redemption. And I loved the first one. On the Xbox.
It is very good quality, but I mean, we're all so busy with our lives these days, and it's kind of the problem I find is that they bring out video games far too frequently, for the amount of time I can actually give them, because some games are quite, they're sort of okay in length, like 8 to 10 hours completion time, but of course you've got numerous series like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead where they're like 100 hours long and this sort of thing, and it just takes forever. And I'm quite a completist with my games. I like to go into all the sort of side, find all the side missions and this sort of thing. So I suppose if you rush through it, you could get through it a lot faster than that. But yeah, it's, so I just don't have the time because, again, I like to dedicate quite a bit of my time, obviously, to the world of UFO investigation, and it's and that's always going to be a thing in my life. But I've got all these other interests, including video games, and then I've got my family to look after, and other distractions in life. It's just life's too short.
It is. I started listening when I first got into podcasts. Obviously, we've got that interest here, but when I was listening to podcasts, I couldn't even consume them fast enough. And then I'd get into, say, someone like Joe Rogan, and they'd be doing like 2-3 hour podcast episodes 2-3 times a week.
Yes.
And I just couldn't even get through one podcast.
There's so much stuff out there. That's the problem, it's just it's just trying to kind of pick and choose, really, what we want, and I suppose that's down to personal interest. So take, for example, there's all sorts of different podcasts on covering many topics, and I'm not just interested in UFOs. I'm interested in other areas of the paranormal. I'm interested in kind of mysteries of the world and that sort of thing, and I've also obviously interested in gaming and many other things. So it's kind of, and there's podcasts for all of those things out there, and it's just having to kind of pick and choose between them, really.
100%.
So yeah, that's my view on UFOs in video games. I think it's probably a first. I don't think any other, I can't take that to the bank, but I think that while many ufologists have looked into movies before and how movies have been, and music as well, and that's another thing that I have done a talk on UFOs in the music industry, and how UFOs have been portrayed in music over the years, and artists who've had encounters that have then gone on to write songs related to it. Again, I've seen other lectures on that subject before, but I don't, to my knowledge, nobody else has kind of taken a dedicated look at the world of video games with it. So you've enjoyed the chat.
Yeah,
it's been amazing. And sort of what you just said then about obviously other aspects, there's other talks on music and movies. So sort of popular media in general. And obviously there's a lot of it which focuses on UFO alien field. So sort of the question I was thinking of, I think it was a UFO Thinker podcast mentioned it recently. I was listening, sort of implanted the idea in my head. Is there so many of these types of videos, movies, games because people are interested in it, or are people interested in it because there's this much popular media, especially like I say going back to the 50s and stuff, that sort of like a chicken or the egg question.
I think it's kind of like it's probably a mix of both, really. I mean, it certainly makes great subject matter, so I can see why they include it in stories all the time, because it's quite intriguing, and there's many aspects to the subject. There's a lot of ammunition there for people to use. One of the latest series, American Horror Story, I've heard that the latest season of that it has links to the abduction phenomena. And one of the earliest seasons did as well. I think season 2 or 3 or something. But so again, there's a lot of subject matter there. But I think some of it's driven. I think some of the interest is driven by the amount it's show. That is shown and featured in the media. I like to think that there's not that many cases out there which are kind of hoaxed because of things that have been seen. I think that I've been at this for 14 years now, and if there's one thing that I will say, it's that there's probably less hoaxers and fabricators out there than a lot of people think that there is. So a lot of people think that the left, right and centre, there's people out there trying to kind of release hoax stories of things that they've seen. They've completely made up, fabricated stories. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen, and I've been led away from particular cases because alarm bells is going off telling me that it's not a real story. But you have to understand, and you too, Ash, of course, we speak with people, to a great extent, and when you talk with people, some of the cases I've worked on, I've talked with people for sort of over 40 hours, like massive amounts of time, that they've given up, In the most of those cases, they don't want their personal details disclosed, so they don't want their real name in there, and a lot of the time they don't want their exact address in there and this sort of thing, and sometimes they don't even want like the district or anything, like there's a contact case I dealt with from Australia, and that was all I was allowed to say It's a gentleman somewhere in Australia. That's it. Yeah. Now that immediately tells you that they're not in it for the sensationalism. Yeah. They're not trying to kind of make a name for themselves because they haven't sold it to papers. They don't really have much to gain from me writing a report. Usually when they speak with me, they don't even know I'm going to write a report. It's, that comes from me saying, can I please, write up a case report? And they're like, and a lot of the time they're like, yeah, as long as you don't include my real details because it affects me and I've had ridicule off it and this sort of thing, So that shows you straight away that they're talking about things that they think are real experiences. Now, in many cases, they're not. Yeah. So a lot of the time, there's mundane explanations for both UFO sightings, as you know, and also the contact subject. There's mundane explanations for that too. So you've got sleep hypnagogia and sleep paralysis and things like that. People can experience that and think that they're experiencing contact. Now, that may partially be because of things that they've seen before. In actual fact, it's got to be because obviously they've got to. The only reason they're coming to me in the first place must be because they're relating that to aliens. Now, why would they relate to aliens? They must have seen something before on the subject, either loosely, maybe while watching X-Files or something like that, or maybe they've got an interest in the UFOs and have read all about it. Now, you always have to take that on board as well, of course, because, for example, if somebody comes to me and they're describing greys and they're talking, I went up into a flying saucer or whatever, and they're talking about lingo that tells me that they've looked into the subject in depth. Yeah. Well, if they've done that before their experiences, and let's say their experiences may have happened, let's say in their bedroom and they're lying in bed or whatever, and they have a contact experience, and they know, their brain knows all about UFOs, you have to take that on board. You have to be like, could it have been some kind of vivid nightmare, that your brain's cooked up, based on what you know about the subject. It's far more compelling when they don't really have an interest in UFOs, and I've dealt with lots of cases like that as well. And essentially what we're talking about right now is archetypes. Yeah, so it's basically like that people will see things on TV and then they will relate it and it will turn into real experiences. But I've dealt with cases where that couldn't possibly be in the case. I've dealt with cases involving children where their minds won't have been polluted by anything to do with the UFO subject. They won't have been allowed to watch X-Files or any of that. And yet they still report the same types of beings and the same craft shapes and this sort of thing, yeah, and the same experiences. Now, I've also dealt with cases where little details come out from time to time in these cases, and it's only stuff that people who've really done their homework on the subject will know about. Yeah, so we're not talking about general stuff like what you generally experience in an abduction scenario. Yeah, I'm talking about little details like how the beings interact with them, particular things the beings are doing to them. And you see this on repeated occasions from completely separate cases from different places. And this is not stuff that they could have picked up via television or just general films on the subject matter. It would have to be sort of very in-depth discussions on the contact phenomena. And most of the people I work with have not really looked into the subject in too much depth, or have had the experience first and then they've gone looking afterwards, which is absolutely fine, of course. If you've seen something, you want to know more about it, what you're going to do, you're going to go online and have a look. You might start watching some documentaries, read books or whatever. But at the time when they had the experience, they didn't know much about the subject, so they didn't kind of see it and be like, oh, that's a grey in my room, or oh, that's a domed disc or a flying triangle up there. They're like, wow, it's a strange craft, or there's a monster in my room, or a big insect or whatever. So I find that it's very compelling, and you get a lot more cases like that than you do cases where it appears that they're trying to make a name for themselves. I think that to my knowledge, at least the cases that come my way, there's very few percentage, I would say, are unknown fabrications, or things that I've kind of rooted out as a known hoax. And a lot of the people, when you talk to people for an extended period of time, you can just tell by the way that they answer the questions, the emotions that come out, the how quick they give the response, the exact details they provide me and everything, where they're describing accurately everything that's happened, not just about the actual beings and the craft or anything, but about the whole experience. Oh, this is exactly where I walked and they're not there. And we'll follow it on Google Maps and this sort of thing, so it's it usually comes across quite compelling. And a lot of the time they haven't had a background in the subject. So I think there's a lot out there, but I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that they couldn't have played a UFO video game and then, and then their experiences have come about because of that. Obviously, there's going to be an element to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it affects society in lots of different ways, doesn't it? But it's very interesting to see that it's being portrayed and is out there. And I think with what's happened in recent years in the States with the legislation and everything else that's going on with that, very, very interesting times for the subject. I think that we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more popularity in that. And there has been ongoing series on the subject. And as I said, the new game, they're here. So I don't know whether that's because of what's been going on recently, but it might just be random that it's coming out now. But interesting.
Could be a game developer or a writer like yourself that has an idea, has an interest, pushes it to get it developed.
Absolutely.
Try to write to developers and publishers, say, "Oh, I've got this idea for a game. I want to get it out there."
Maybe UFO Wave, the video game, will come out sometime later. Who knows? But the thing is, I even though I am a coder, I am actually a programmer. But it requires massive. I mean, the thing is, video games that come out today are not made by one person at all. That was back in the days of Atari and etc. Yeah, then it might have been individual developers. Most games these days are made by hundreds of people, and every single person only has one little tiny aspect of it, like they might be working on a particular aspect of the sound design or the level layout or whatever. The initial creator, I guess, is where the ideas come from. So somebody out there must have mapped out the original ideas for the game. But even then, it's probably been polluted with lots of different ideas from a collective company where they've all chipped in. And or maybe some of the original ideas have been destroyed, which is one of the reasons I wanted to keep UFO Wave back and self-publish it. Because I didn't want another publisher taking my initial idea and then changing it. And I especially didn't want them to put kind of laser guns or, kind of just stereotypical sci-fi stuff in there. I wanted it to be genuinely themed on the real subject in a kind of fun way, but all the cards in the game and all the beings types and the craft types and everything, it's all based on real cases. So I think that that was very important to me. So that's why I kept back that. But I couldn't do the same in the video game because I couldn't code a video game and be able to do all the sound for it and everything else. You'd have to. Lots of experts come together to them. I mean, they're very, very complex things these days, aren't they? But who knows? We'll see. We'll see where things go in the future.
You never know.
You never know. Yeah, I mean, I do intend on writing a book because many people have said it's time I got a book out there. So. Now that the game's done and out there, once it's set up and is just going on Amazon to whoever wants it, my next main focus is probably going to be to write a book. So
that's not definitely be. I know that's going to be fascinating if you do, because the amount of knowledge and experience you've got is just incredible. Yeah,
I wanted to be kind of just my whole view on the subject, all aspects of it. It's going to include some cases in there, of course, but it's going to be more than that. I didn't want it to be a kind of cold collection of case reports. I may release that later on down the line, but there's some sort of collector's thing. But it's not the intention to earn money in the same way UFO Wave. It's never been intended to earn me a load of money. I don't care really. I just did it because I wanted to do it. Just the passion for the subject really. And the same with my book. But I do want it to kind of be a kind of my overall look on the subject and everything that's happened with it over the last 14 years of being an investigator. It's certainly been an interesting time.
Awesome. So I know as your role as chairman of the Birmingham UFO group, you recently started up your meetings again.
Yeah.
Do you want to give a bit of details on the next one, how people can find out more about them?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So our main website is www.bufog.com, BUFOG.com. And on there, you can find all sorts of information, but including the case reports for investigations that I and the other investigator for BUFOG add to there. There's literally hundreds of case reports on there, but also there's a section on there for events, upcoming meetings. We also are planning skywatching. We usually do a couple of skywatches a year. Planning one for April. It's going to be a Saturday in April for a skywatch. This time we're going to Barbeacon in Walsall. Hopefully going to get out there in April. The meetings we hold in Oldbury in North Birmingham once a month, and I've started doing them on the first Thursday of every month, unless for whatever reason we can't get the room or a lecturer can't make that first Thursday or whatever. We have a bit of flexibility on there, but it's usually going to be the first Thursday of every month. We started again back in September, I believe, or was it October? Maybe it was October. It's probably the start of October, actually. And we've been in Amsterdam for sort of over a year, and it's really nice. It's picked up pace again really nicely. We've got a nice community going again. It's one of the important things to me in this virtual world of staring at screens and everything is to kind of come together as a collective, like you did with your conference last year, of course. And I really feel that, you know, face-to-face communication, I know everybody's scared of that with the current situation and everything, but it's a very spacious, you know, function room with lots of tables sort of spread apart if people want that. There's well-priced bar, free parking out front. Anybody's welcome to come along to our meetings. You don't have, you know, if you live in the Birmingham area, by all means, come on down. If you don't live in the Birmingham area, there's a number of cheap hotels in the area, and you can find out details on all that on the website. So everybody's welcome to attend our meetings. And at the majority of our meetings, we have a speaker come and talk, sometimes international, but also many from the UK. I sometimes give talks. I'm working on a new talk with a contactee named John Judge. He's come down our group for many years. I released his case report and his experiences last year, and I'm going to be doing a joint lecture with him in April. So anybody's welcome to attend that. And it should be very interesting indeed. So we regularly get lectures. Sometimes we'll do screenings of movies and new documentaries as well, where we get given permission. But yeah, the group's been running now since like late 2007. So we're probably, because there's many groups that sort of come and go over the years, and BUFOG's getting to be one of the sort of more dedicated groups now. It's been going for 14 years, and it will continue to go, especially with me at the helm. Because it's very interesting to me to get that active community going in the area. Definitely. And I think that Birmingham's a big enough city to warrant its own dedicated UFO organisation, which is why I became the investigator for BUFOG in the first place, and then later on the chairman. But yeah, we've also got a Facebook group, BUFOG Truth Seekers. That's where we talk in between meetings. Anybody's welcome to join that. I'm the admin for it. I won't stand for sort of ridicule and that sort of thing. If I think anybody's being overly mean, I will eject them from the group. It's for chatting about UFOs and other areas of the paranormal. You can come on in, ask questions, post videos, photos, chat with me directly about your experiences, whatever you like. So we've got that going on, and I think that's pretty much it. It's mostly contained within the website and the Facebook page as the two main. You can find out what's going on with upcoming meetings, both through BUFOG Truth Seekers, through our official organisation page, which also exists on Facebook. So if you search for Birmingham UFO Group, you'll get a separate page. And that pretty much the only thing I put in that is new case reports and upcoming meetings. And then, of course, the BUFOG website has all the upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is going to be on the 3rd of February, first Thursday of February. And we've got a guy named David Graham coming along. David is a hypnotherapist, and he's been doing a study looking at contactees who've gone under hypnosis, and he's looked into different aspects that they're coming out with under hypnosis. I believe that there's also elements of past lives linking into his talk as well. So it'll be very interesting. It's only going to be the second time that we've had a hypnotherapist speak over the years on the subject, and I'm really looking forward to finding out what his study tells him. But that's coming up in next month.
Awesome. Another website for the UFO Wave card game is www.ufowavegame.com.
That's right, yeah.
So people can check out what's happening there.
Yeah, at the moment it's obviously it's in between times at the moment. So because at the moment it's being shipped out to the backers, it's currently not available. But if you go there, you can find out all details. And if you subscribe to that website, I'll obviously be posting updates on that when it goes live on Amazon. I'll be posting that all over the place. So you're more than welcome to purchase the game at that point. And if you have any questions about it or anything, just get in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. That was I really enjoyed that talk. It was fascinating.
No problem at all. It's an interesting angle of the UFO subject in how it's portrayed in the media.
Definitely, and it's not an area sort of we don't speak to people who talk about that aspect of it. So it's been thoroughly enjoying, and to talk about the Commodore 64 and all that kind of stuff. I had the 48K Spectrum. I had the Spectrum and the Amiga. So I've been through most of those games over the years. So
it is great to just look back, and there's lots of great gaming memories, and I'm very excited to see where things go in the years ahead. with the rate of the technological advances in recent years in the world of video gaming is absolutely dramatic. And it's I think I mentioned the PS5, so we've got that on the 4K TV, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. The visual quality of games these days, it's not long before they're going to be kind of photorealistic, which again it's quite controversial, really, when it goes into that sort of territory, because of the nature of a lot of games, the violent nature of them. But there's something, there's a demo themed on The Matrix, which came out a number of months ago, solely for the PlayStation 5, I think, and to all intents and purposes, it looks photorealistic. It's absolutely incredible. You can watch that on YouTube. You can watch it in 4K on YouTube. I think it's called Matrix Awakens, but it's breathtaking. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see them focus on the UFO subject with that sort of visual quality. Yeah. We'll wait to see.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Dave, and good
no
luck
problem at all.
with the game, with everything going forward.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
No doubt we'll speak again soon.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Pursuit of the Paranormal with Ash and Greg.